Tonight we have Ember. She's also spoken on RFRx before, and we are so happy to have her back here again with us to volunteer her time on a Monday night. Ember is the host of the podcast Atheist Lives, which features stories of how people found their way free of religions and other systems of thought control. Ember is a proponent of science, equality, including LGBT rights, freedom, including bodily autonomy, and reason. She opposes oppressive, repressive, and regressive ideologies like, but not limited to, gender criticalism and Christian nationalism. And as a reminder, Ember uses she, her pronouns. Welcome, Ember.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. I'm so happy to have you back.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Yes, we're so looking forward to it and cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us this time. If you would like to go ahead and launch into that, or if there's anything that you want to tell us in preparation of your presentation, you may do
Um,
so.
yeah, sure. Just that one technical note, I have a brief video clip that I'm gonna like activate when I need it, and then as soon as it plays, it can go away, but I don't have the button for that, so I thought I'd let you know.
Perfect, perfect. And we will work through any tech gremlins that come up. So we'll get through this together.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. It'll be great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, feel free to go right ahead then with your presentation for us.
All righty. So last year we talked a little bit about some of the similarities between the atheist community and the trans community. When Helen asked me to come back for another round, I wasn't sure what to talk about. There is no shortage of topics. The tricky part is which one? In this age full of end of the world drama on a zillion different fronts at once, which thing does an intersex transgender atheist minister running several nonprofits and a genetic research project while preparing to flee her home country to avoid death camps pick as the one thing to talk about? So why not all the things? Because if you mix together all the things I do into a single message, it's this: all the pseudoscience conspiracy theories that are making our world substantially worse are, when the Scooby Doo kids pull off the masks, in fact, the same conspiracy theory. And it's Christian nationalism under that white hood. That is to say, they all make the same basic arguments using the same fallacies in the same way and for the same reason. Like related languages, the only thing different is the vocabulary. Whether you're talking about flat Earth, young Earth, gender criticals, anti vaccine, 9/11 truthers, or anything else, they all work in exactly the same way. They provide no evidence for their own claims, but only pick at specific things from the predominant consensus under the fallacious assumption that if they can prove this one thing about the mainstream scientific view incorrect, then their pet theory somehow wins by default. When Kent Hovind or Ken Ham tries to demonstrate why they think others should join their creationist religions, they point to things about evolution that they don't understand, like whale evolution or endogenous retroviruses. They say these things can't really be real. And because those specific examples aren't real, why the whole hypothesis of evolution must be junk. And therefore, the thing they believe has to be true. Never mind that what they've proposed as the only alternative in their false dichotomy includes a magic rib woman, talking snakes and donkeys, and a carpenter ghost who wants to live inside you. Clearly, if evolution isn't true, then creationism, their brand of culturally regressive young earth Christian creationism in particular, must be correct. The flat earthers do exactly the same thing. They say there are no photos from space. When you show them the photos, they say it must be CGI. And just like with the young earthers, ignoring the fossils that demonstrate whale evolution, all the real evidence isn't material because it isn't relevant to the real claim they're making. It isn't relevant to the real claim they're making, but refuse to defend that the Bible is true, full stop. It's weird that those two groups point and laugh at each other so much because they're doing the same things. But the fundamental element that makes a conspiracy theory is the conspiracy. For flat earthers, it's that NASA and all the space agencies and all their staffs are lying to everyone for Satan.
If they can convince you that the Earth is 13 billion years old, it come out of the Big Bang, and we evolved from monkeys, there's no need for God.
For young earthers, it's that all the geological and evolutionary biologists and nuclear physicists and so forth are lying to everyone about the age of the earth for Satan. For gender criticals, it's that the entirety of medical science, every physician in every specialty, along with all of biology, neurology, genetics, and a bunch of other disciplines, all of them are lying to everyone. But those blessed with the special knowledge, they know the secret truth. These examples are really obvious, but others are more subtle. When you look, you see the same mechanisms under the hood. 9/11 truthers insist there's a conspiracy. The government is lying to everyone because the story of September 11th doesn't make sense to them. And all the evidence you might present to answer any specific complaints gets brushed away for arbitrary reasons. That's because they don't care about the evidence or the truth. The conspiracy theory is just an outer shell. I got a couple of flat earthers to admit to this during a debate a couple of years ago. They say they believe flat earth because they believe the Bible, period, full stop. Whatever they have to do to justify it, they will do, because as long as we're trying to convince them the earth isn't flat, we aren't talking about whether the Bible is true. That's what's called a Mott and Bailey. You're doing battle over the outer Mott, the thing the conspiracy theory claims to be about, but you can't ever change the person's mind, because as soon as you nail them down on one point, they retreat to the Bailey, the inner stronghold that isn't even anything to do with the conspiracy claims. It's always the Bible or some other equally held religious level conviction based solely on wishes and feels. They know they can't defend such a belief, so they protect it with barriers, like conspiracy theories. You can't beat the conspiracy theory because they have religious certainty, and you can't get at the religion because it's protected by the conspiracy. This is why we say you can't reason a person out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. Reason, evidence, and reality have no bearing on why they believe these things. For 9/11 truthers, the conspiracy behind it all is that the government is overrun by demons and Satanists who want to bring the USA down in order to demolish Christianity. Somehow, for some reason. Hail Satan. Like the young earthers with their just asking questions, pseudo-skepticism about whale evolution, or the flat earthers with their insistence a level plane is all anyone has ever seen or measured. The truthers insist it's simply impossible. A jet could bring down the Twin Towers, or that a small group of terrorists could have been behind it. It must be a conspiracy. Therefore, demons in the halls of Congress. If you believe any of these ridiculous ideas and you think any of the others are foolish, consider why you think those are foolish and apply the same criticisms to the one that you do hold. Congratulations, you've taken your first steps towards becoming a critical thinker. But because Bible isn't always in evidence, for gender criticals, the conspiracy they appeal to is a little murkier. They're a really new one, only arising with the latest moral panic around 2015, and they aren't all on the same page yet. Some of them point to big pharma and insist all the sciences are lying about trans people, so a few corporations can grab a tiny bit of extra cash off of the gender care services they offer anyway to cis people, like Matt Walsh, J.K. Rowling, and Frank Turek, all cis and all benefiting from gender affirming care. Others point at trans women and say that's not a genetically female person, and therefore the goal of the grand conspiracy is to erase females somehow, for some reason. If that sounds a lot like the anti-Semitic Great Replacement theory, you're correct. They copy-pasted that one so completely, there are even some conspiracists like Jennifer Billick and Helen Joyce who actually say it's the Jews behind this great evil because they control everything. Who they blame varies, but at bottom, they all truly believe that every medical association on earth is lying to everyone in service of the grand conspiracy. This doesn't just mirror the flat earth claim that NASA is lying to everyone, it far exceeds it in scope and scale. To be blunt, the gender critical conspiracy theory is even more ridiculous than flat earth, and it's even more tightly bound to Christian nationalism. Even though Helen, the other Helen, is an avowed atheist, she spreads her hateful pseudoscience and undermines Jewish people as much as gender and sexual minorities. She may not be Christian, but she's doing the work of the Christian nationalists. And we can see it in the actions the hate groups take. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the organization dedicated to tracking the efforts of hate groups, has published the receipts about how all the anti-trans groups, from SEGEM to GenSpec to that imposter medical organization that was in the news recently, the American College of Pediatricians, more on them in a moment, they all share staff, resources, and funding. I'll give you 3 guesses where that staff and funding is coming from, but you probably only need one. And you're right, Christian nationalist organizations. The SPLC has also put together a handy graph showing how all the pseudoscience organizations are linked one to the next. GenSpec shares staff with FAIR, which shares staff with the Heritage Foundation, all working on both Project 2025 and to oppose WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, that is. The pseudoscience groups are in bed with the ADF, whom I don't have to tell anyone here, is explicitly Christian nationalist. And they all work to help out the American College of Pediatricians, which was founded originally to oppose abortion rights, switched to opposing gay marriage and gay adoption, and now opposes trans people's health care. They still oppose the other things, but those issues don't bring in the funding like they used to, so they focus on the political hot button du jour. All of these organizations exist to do specific things, but the methods are the same. Undermine human rights while claiming they're only doing it to protect another vulnerable group, which they're also actively harming. All of it is ultimately to serve the ends of an authoritarian takeover by way of Christian nationalism. That's what Project 2025 is, after all, the explicit plan for how to enact that goal in the United States. It's a little ironic that conspiracy theory pseudoscience fearmongers, like the anti-trans groups, are themselves part of an actual conspiracy. But since that nefarious undertaking is out in the open, maybe it doesn't count. Or perhaps, in this case, it's a smokescreen. They make accusations that liberal Jewish billionaires are manipulating the levers of power to destroy the Christian social order. That's on page 197 of Helen's book, by the way, precisely because extremist billionaires supporting their misinformation really are spending billions to manipulate the levers of power. Maybe Projection 2025 would be a more accurate name. The point is that even this conspiracy outer fringe of the culture war is also operating in service, whether consciously or obliviously, to advance the ends of Christian nationalism. And lo, it's working. Countries where these groups have a foothold and influence are growing more right-wing, more reactionary, and more explicit about the religious reasons behind their blatant attempts to control people's lives and end autonomy. And this stuff gets insidious. Just a few weeks ago, the FFRF was parasitized into spreading this exact flavor of Christian nationalist nonsense, authored by another avowed atheist. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with that controversy and how FFRF realized that defending civil rights for all is critical to fighting against religious oppression. As much as it hurt the organization, I'm glad it happened because it made the situation crystal clear, putting a spotlight on the fact that just because a person is an atheist doesn't mean they believe anything else in particular. They aren't necessarily a skeptic. They aren't necessarily a humanist or educated or inclined to critical thinking or understand empathy. They don't necessarily want to oppose Christian nationalism. Indeed, this past year, I myself had a run-in with the Atheists for Liberty organization, which are basically atheists who left the church, but not the dogma of how people ought to be forced to live. They no longer say, because the Bible says so, but they do still say so. And the Christian nationalists are happy to support them because their work in turn supports the Christian nationalist cause. Atheists for Liberty, for example, always has a presence supporting the explicitly Christian nationalist organization Turning Point USA's events and supports the same legislative efforts to eliminate bodily autonomy for women, for all GSM people, and for racial minorities that they do. So the flat earther conspiracy theorists are open about being all about the Bible. The gender critical conspiracy theory is being fueled by Christian nationalism for political power, much like the young earth conspiracy theory was once used as a political wedge to try to undermine public education. And even though Kitzmiller versus Dover was years ago, that damage has a long half-life. Many schools in the US still effectively teach creation only, and even more teach both creation and evolution as broadly equally valid. One of the organizations continuing to promote the pseudoscience supporting that idea is the Discovery Institute, which a while back put out a statement called the Wedge Document. You can look that up later, but TLDR, the plan they published is to use creationism as a stepping stone toward the ultimate goal of establishing a theocracy in the United States. Thank goodness the fascists are inept enough to outright tell us what they're up to and leave the receipts lying around. Or maybe they're just confident people won't be convinced by evidence because their efforts to undermine critical thinking are working. There's a famous saying in skeptical circles: those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. It isn't just the overall intelligence and rational capabilities of the public at stake. That too, but this engineered increase in gullibility isn't just on purpose, it's being done for a purpose. Creationism isn't just keeping millions of adults from understanding evolution by having deprived them of a comprehensive science education as kids. It's also layering cement on the indoctrination they've been given that reinforces the idea that the Bible is true. And that is the actual point. Because if the Bible is true, then of course it's reasonable that demons are real. And if demons are real, then of course it's reasonable they've taken over the government. Why, it only stands to reason that the demons in charge want to make abortions accessible, or let gay people marry, or let trans people exist, or let Black people be free, or let women vote. It's all a satanic effort to undermine God himself. And there it is. The conspiracy. All the social progress we've made since the time of the Civil War is the work of Satan, and it must be undone. God says so. Through the politicians he's selected, of course. Just give them total control, and they'll fix everything. Wink. As I've noted in other places and other times, sure, there are people who don't care about any of this. They may even have strong opinions on the shape of the earth or what defines a woman that stand in opposition to literally all of science on those questions. They just want to be free to not have to go to church and be told how they have to live. For those people, I have to ask, what do you imagine secular advocacy is for? Here at RFR, the mission is to help people recover from the damage religion has inflicted on all of us, often as children, and to help reduce the damage religion will do to future generations. We can't do that if we get mired down in debate over whether certain kinds of people deserve human rights. It should be a given that all people do, because the alternative, that none of us do, is what we're fighting against. If you happen to think it's anti-intellectual to not allow the free exchange of ideas over whether trans people are real. Consider whether you feel the same way about proposals that we should be spending time and energy discussing the shape of the earth or its age, or whether demons really are running the US government. I hope you'd agree that would be ridiculous, because it is. These are all the same conspiracy theory formula, all in the service to Christian nationalism. If you think it's too woke to not even have the conversation over the legitimacy of trans people, first of all, weird that you think that conversation should happen here, but would you put the same weight to suggestions that we should have the conversation about the Holocaust, race realism, whether women should continue to be allowed to vote, science being taught in schools, if there should even be schools? All of these questions are put forward by the same people and for the same reasons: to undermine history, undermine our groups, undermine science, undermine trust in our own ability to reason. If you find yourself asking these questions, I really do wonder, what do you think secular advocacy is for? Why do we want to prevent a religious takeover of our society, if not to protect our right to live our lives as best we can from those who are intent on abusing religion to gain power? Conspiracy theories, even the silly ones, are dangerous. They undermine critical thinking, spread harmful misinformation, and prime people to buy into even more foolish ideologies. But more than that, they all serve the ends of Christian nationalists whose number one goal is to strip everyone of personal autonomy. They don't want to just throw trans people into camps, or just deport everyone who isn't white, or just make all abortions illegal, or just eliminate public education, or just ban gay marriage and recriminalize homosexuality, or just make going to church mandatory. They are hell-bent on doing all of them and much more besides. We have to stand against all of it, or we'll get all of it anyway. We see it happening right now. In the US states where trans rights are all but gone, they're proposing legislation to reverse gay rights, and many have already banned or restricted reproductive health care. Once they take away rights from one group, they move on to the next, all because of what some person tells them the God that nobody has ever seen wants. If you do agree that human rights are a fundamental issue to secular advocacy, if you do agree that truth matters, that reality matters, and that, in the words of that famous religious leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., none of us are free until all of us are, then I congratulate you on following the premise of atheism as a political movement to its logical conclusion. Ultimately, this is about autonomy. This is about our right to live our own lives, period. And it always has been. But even if you still think one race of people is genetically inferior, or you do think the Jewish question is a reasonable topic for debate, or you do think women aren't fit to have our own bank accounts, I'd hope you'd learn and grow and become a better person, but I'd still say it's in your own best interest to stand with us dirty atheists and push back against the Christian nationalists as hard as you can, because it's your freedom at stake too. Your ability to get free from and recover from religion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ember. Wow, you really covered a lot in a short period of time. That was fantastic. When you first told us how much you were going to cover, I was thinking to myself, "Wow, that's a tall order," and I think you did it. So, thank you for saying all that very succinctly and powerfully. And I love so many of the points that you made. Most importantly, what you got to at the end there, which was that it's important for us not to be divided up into tiny little groups that are easy to defeat and ignore. If we're all standing up for everyone's rights, then we're going to be a lot more effective than if we kind of ignore bits and pieces of things because they're not our main central issue. So thank you for kind of connecting the dots on a lot of those things. Wow, that was fantastic.
One
And I know
does
we
one's best.
Yeah, that was great. I don't know if Glenda had any comments on that too, but I know we have a lot of questions as well. But yeah, go ahead, Glenda.
Yes, I do love, I just wanted to say at the very, very beginning, because learning about conspiracy theories is a little bit of a special interest of mine. And you touched on a concept at the beginning that I think you could just talk about forever and ever and ever, which is that the belief in some conspiracy theories it engenders this idea that you have access to secret special information that elevates you above the rest of a population. Like, I've got the answer. I have the secret. I am blessed with magical knowledge, which mirrors a lot of religious thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you study things like QAnon and other conspiracy theories, again, they're all linked. And it's amazing how like 99% of them somehow all go back to Jewish people. Like it's incredible that it's like y'all are
Mm-hmm.
so predictable and cliche and boring and unimaginative despite all of this creative stuff. When you dig down deep into it, it's like, and it's just anti-Semitism. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I loved how you made that connection too, that, so many of those talking points, I mean, they hardly even changed anything. It's almost like they just copy pasted it and, changed the words here and there. And it's those same bad ideas that if they were still in their sort of older forms of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, we would recognize them immediately for what they are. But all they had to do was change a few words, and we find ourselves susceptible to these bad ideas over and over and over again. And
Yeah,
that's
I think that's why they do it. It's sort of an
yeah.
evolutionary process. As one starts to be identified as a parasite and weeded out by society, it mutates rapidly to find a form that can continue to survive, much like religion.
I've heard it said that religion is like a virus.
Mm-hmm. It's uncanny. I know you folks have talked to a number of Bible scholars and religious historians and so forth. David Fitzgerald comes to mind off the top of my
Mhm.
head, and it's unreal how much Christianity has changed over the centuries. I mean, I found out recently that it was only roughly 50 years ago when we uncovered more texts at one of the sites that revealed that Asherah's name was the name of a goddess rather than just the word grove, which had been what had been translated before, which made a bit more sense. Asherah's shrine rather than the Grove shrine. And so our Bibles have been updated. The actual text has changed within people who are here's lifetimes.
Mhm. Yes, this is something that I constantly am bothered by when people will try to add weight to some of these ideas by saying, this is like ancient knowledge. We've always known this. This is, corroborated by the texts going back millennia.
Eh,
No, it
they,
isn't.
it's yeah, it's very much like conspiracy thinking because they adjust what they say it says to match what they can make it fit into for reality. One that I come across all the time, partly is in counter-apologetics and partly as a cosmologist, is this idea that the Bible predicts the Big Bang. It does no such thing. Before Edwin Hubble published 100 years ago, well, 1924, so it'll be 101 years this year, but whatever. Before then, they said, oh, of course the universe is eternal. God is a perfect being. He would never make an ephemeral universe that doesn't last. But as soon as the Big Bang, there were wars within the church over this until the 1960s when we confirmed that the Big Bang was the model based on the cosmic microwave background radiation. And then they all switched over to, oh, well, it says right here in Genesis, let there be light. So the Bible predicted this. We were wrong before, but the Bible has always been right.
It's just like the rereadings and retconning of any other text that purports to tell the future, or Nostradamus or whatever it is. It's just vague enough that we can think that it says whatever we want it to say because it's lacking in any specific details that would give us any more information than what we already know. Nobody could have read Genesis and come up with the concept of the Big Bang. However, it's just vague enough that we can say, once we've discovered that idea, oh, yeah, that sounds like what the Bible said. Well, weird how it didn't provide us a pathway to come up with that information before we
Right.
already knew about it.
It is so vague. I mean, you've got people like Ray Comfort using the same verse to argue that the Bible predicts a spherical earth orbiting around the sun that the flat earthers use to say it's clearly a flat earth talked about in the Bible. The same verse. It doesn't tell us anything if it's that ambiguous.
Right. This can't be the only basis for how we're evaluating claims. Not critically anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, David Fitzgerald again, he does give us some room for falsification criteria using just the Bible itself. We know 3 of the Gospels copied off the first one, and we know the first one is fictional. So we can just throw all the Gospels out. Ta-da!
Done.
Yeah. Oh, David that's one of the reasons that I go through so many books. David's stuff is just fascinating.
Yes, it is. We love David here. We had him on a couple of weeks ago, actually, and he was telling us about one of his latest volumes in his series. And I still need to catch up on all of them. I've got a couple of his books on audio, and yeah, highly recommend. I'll go in here in a minute and pull some of the links for some of his books that we can add to the chat because, yeah, he has just written tomes on
Mm-hmm.
this, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I was expecting like dense information and history, sort of like the presentation I just gave, but nailed his first one. It's engaging. It draws you in, and you're like, you want to know what happens next, even though he's talking about stuff from 2,000 years ago. It's crazy.
It is, it is. It's great, and to your point, it's very accessible, and we need more of that because we know that conspiracy theories and these bad ideas travel so rapidly, and they reach so many people, and they gain traction online, and they're accessible. We need this kind of information also to be accessible to people. It can't just be that if you have gotten a degree in the subject, you're able to understand the concepts that are being presented. We need to present information in ways that everyone can understand so that we can all use our own faculties to critically evaluate the claims and have the
Mm-hmm.
evidence. And yeah, I agree. I think David does a great job of writing accessibly for people to be able to engage in this and be aware of this information. So that was a great plug. And I dropped the
Yeah.
link for his book Nailed in the chat for anybody that's interested in that. He's got several others though.
Oh yes. He's been a busy. Well, he's been at this for decades.
Yes, he has. And we found out he's also written science fiction too. Not to go too far off topic, but he's
It
been writing for a while.
it happens whenever I walk into a room, just immediately tangents.
Yes, yes. I'm bad about that too. But well, kind of on that same note, not really a tangent, but are there any other resources that you think are particularly useful for people who want to learn more about this topic or about inoculating? I'm
Inoculation?
yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, protecting themselves from these kind of bad ideas.
I mean anything that can help with critical thinking, with skepticism, um, epistemology. Honestly, several of the hosts over on the line are really good about not just doing the epistemology live, but then explaining what they did and why after the call is over. They're like, the reason I asked this person this question is because I wanted to highlight how he was doing this thing, which showed that, he wasn't thinking critically. He had no warrant for his belief and was just making baseless claims, or whatever the case may be. I learned a lot from back episodes of Matt Dillahunty and Tracy Harris over on AXP. I mean, I was no slouch to begin with, not to toot my own horn, but these people are very good at what they do, and watching them do it can really up your game. As far as specific stuff, it depends on the flavor of thing that you're dealing with. Like if you find yourself confronted with a lot of flat earthers, there are a few people who specialize in debunking flat earthers, like Planner Walk, Simon Dan, MC Toon. If you're dealing with a lot of young earthers, there's people who do that specifically. Dapper Dino does it a lot. Erica Gutsick Gibbon, and there's a bunch more besides. And if you're dealing with transphobes, that's something we do on the Transpositions, the YouTube channel that I host with Stephanie Helms, Bree McCune, and Carly Chardonnay Webb on YouTube. And there's also On the Line, there's the Transatlantic call-in show, which they're not so much the anti-conspiracy thing. I mean, technically we're a news show. We don't, but it comes up a lot. You would be amazed how often that yes. But yeah, if you have specific questions relating to how to deal with transphobes, a call-in show is the perfect thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And those also are all very accessible resources that you mentioned. So thank you again for providing that. I know that's what a lot of people, that's the type of content that people are accessing. And it's great to know that there are so many great sources of content online that people can go to get information on these kind of what I would think of as niche topics. But there's so much dialogue going on around them. It's important to, even though okay, maybe it sounds silly at first. Oh, this is just some conspiracy theory. I'm not going to put any stock in this. But if it gets traction online, it's important also to understand what is the other side of the conversation here and how can I address or combat this information when I see it come up. So great
Yeah, for
resources.
sure. I mean, as I mentioned, it's often our inclination is to just laugh at the flat earther and walk away.
Mhm.
And that's a valid response to any of these conspiracy theories. But on the flip side, and only engage if you have the mental wherewithal, you have the spell slots, and you feel like you're properly equipped to do it. But if you do it, you probably won't deconvert the conspiracy theorists you're engaging with, because like I said, they've got that Mott and Bailey setup. They need something to change in their life to crack that facade. But anybody who's watching in an audience, for example, you might just give them the piece of information they need to wake up and go, huh, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Like there are so many people in the atheist community on YouTube, especially. Godless Granny comes to mind, who was a young
Mhm.
earth creationist until something cracked her open and she was like, the flood never happened. This is really stupid. Paula G is another one. There's so many people who have escaped this nonsense because something triggered their critical thinking.
Mhm.
Ember, I love that
Absolutely.
you brought that up. I don't know if any of y'all know about the subreddit called the QAnon Casualties subreddit. It's a really astounding community, and it's mostly like a support group for people who have lost loved ones. When I say lost loved ones and family members, as in not that they died, but that they became these deep believers of these theories and no longer have a relationship with them. And there was an ex QAnon member who shared his journey of how he left QAnon or ended that belief system because he was a computer programmer. And so he knew that was his expertise. And some of the conspiracy theories that he was seeing about dealing with computers, he knew that wasn't physically possible because he knows how computers works. He's like, I know this isn't a thing. I know that this can't work this way. So it just kind of clicked, and once that domino fell, other ones began to fall. And there are one of the most, I think it's the top post in the QAnon casualties. I shared the RFR resources to this young adult at the time because it was so heartbreaking. But he was a survivor of the Parkland, Florida school shooting, and his father turned into a false flag shooting believer, even though his son survived the shooting, believed it was fake, that somehow his son was an actor or not, that it didn't really happen. And so sometimes, even if they've got that information, like the way conspiracy theory thinking affects your brain is just incredible. And so I highly recommend that resource too, just QAnon casualties on a subreddit. But I love that you brought up those other atheist content creators, that sometimes it just for some reason, a random fact will click in their brain and that'll start this cascade effect thinking of being able to get back into critical thinking in general.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Reddit, because as a person who mostly dwells on YouTube, I forget things like Reddit exist. And, we all have these blind spots. And by definition, a blind spot is something we're not aware of. And this is one of the reasons that this organization and so many organizations are so big on diversity, because you never know what the thing is that's going to trip somebody's critical thinking, or remind them of another resource, or remind them there's a whole other area that they may not be thinking about. Many brains, because you never know what's going to reach somebody, what's going to help somebody, or what's going to be the thing they need when they need it.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it might be something that seems completely mundane and insignificant to you, but it's that last straw that breaks the camel's back for them. I mean, I think about, I've told this before on this channel, I was in college just learning about all sorts of different subjects that over time built up enough that I realized, oh, wow, this young earth creationism stuff that I learned can't possibly be true. And I didn't get there because one person yelled at me about it. I got there because of little bits of information from all over started coming in, and it wasn't adding up. It was a little bit here in an archaeology class learning about Neanderthals, and wait a minute, that doesn't fit into this timeline. And, then we're over here learning about astronomy and, how long it takes light to reach us from these distant stars. And wait a minute, that doesn't fit into that timeline either. And over time, it may be that one last thing that builds up enough that somebody scratches their head and goes, oh, wait a minute, hold on. The math isn't mathing. I need to rethink what I'm doing here. And it didn't have to be a big, profound thing. You're just sharing information with people.
Yeah, for sure. And the fun thing, especially with young earthers, is they work really hard to try to come up with answers to all these specific objections. Mr. Deity, Brian Dalton, I believe his name is,
Hmm.
he calls them excusagists now. And I
Yes.
love it, because they come up with the most outrageous, crazy thing, like Jason Lyle, one of the former astrophysicists who works for the creationist groups. In order to explain the light from distant galaxies, he came up with this wacky idea that the speed of light is only half the speed of light going out, but it's infinite coming in towards Earth. I'm like, my guy, first of all, we can measure the speed of light in various directions. In no direction is it moving at an infinite velocity. And even if it were, do you know what it means if the speed of light were infinite? It means all the light from all the stars in that direction would hit us at the same time, and it would all be blue shifted right up into gamma rays or X-rays. We'd fry immediately. You're a physicist, my guy. Come on.
Yes, that's really funny. I love it. Yeah, this is fantastic. I feel like there's so many topics. The more you talk about it, the more topics kind of get brought into this under the same umbrella. We could go on and on forever. But I feel like we should probably get down to a few of the questions that were asked. And I know one of the things that I said we're going to ask questions, and then I started one. Sorry, host prerogative. Uh,
Vetoed.
yes, I'm asking mine. We talked earlier on about how a lot of this goes back to bodily autonomy and
Mm-hmm.
threats to bodily autonomy. And I wondered if you want to share any other ideas about what we can do to kind of protect our bodily autonomy and to support others in protecting theirs from these kinds of incorrect information that's coming out.
Well, the main thing, skepticism, kindness, things like this, it needs to be a top level priority. If you find yourself in a situation, whether it's your consent and autonomy at risk or someone else's, you don't need to get in the details. You don't have to argue semantics or get all pedantic with someone, because if it's on the priority order of human rights, none of that bullshit matters. protect the person, whether it's you or someone else. Help them, make sure they're safe, and then deal with the stupid people afterwards.
I love that. Safety first. It's
Mhm.
it's a good motto. Take care of people, make sure you're safe, make sure they're safe. And I am absolutely stealing your comment about spell slots. I don't want to hear about spoons ever again. We're now speaking in terms of remaining spell slots in
That's
terms of
exactly
our
where that came
energy.
from. Is somebody was tired of explaining spoon theory and is like, everyone who deals with this is neurodivergent. They all know what spell slots are.
Amazing. I
Ember,
am
just
keeping
in
that.
case someone doesn't know that reference, because I love it, I know that, but in case any of our listeners do not know the spell slot or spoon theory, will you please give a brief explanation of that?
Sure. The general idea is that you can imagine your amount of energy to do stuff, particularly social stuff, as like a silverware drawer. And when you wake up in the morning, you have a certain number of spoons. Some days you might have 10 spoons. Some days you may only have 3 spoons. And you need one to go to work and you need one to go to the grocery store. You're spending these spoons, and when they're out, you're done. It doesn't matter how many tasks you still have left to do. So you have to be careful with how you spend them. On days when you have a shit ton of spoons, maybe you can do extra stuff like go to a party or go visit a friend you haven't seen in a while. But on days when you're really short, you have to be extra mindful and not overdo it. Spell slots, it's the same general idea, but instead of spoons, which are kind of silly, it's the idea that you've only got so much magical potential in a day. And this comes from role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and some other variants. Depending on what kind of character you are, some days you have different amounts than others. Some your basic spellcaster has however many points a day. That's however many they get. But there's other variant classes that are a little bit chaotic, a little bit wild, and that's analogous with neurodivergency. People who have a little bit of unpredictability in their mental capacity, whether it's for spells or socializing. And every morning you wake up, you roll a dice to see how many spell points you have for that day, and that's it. That's what you got to work with.
I like that analogy so much better than the spoons.
Mhm.
That's fun. And
It's
I
nerdier
think
too.
yes, which is probably why we
Mhm.
like it here. But I think that's also a really important thing to point out too, given that, there are some people who, for whatever reason, it may be targeted by multiple different ones of these conspiracy theories just due to the various social identities and locations that they occupy. And those people who are getting hit from all sides by this stuff may just generally end up having fewer of the quote unquote spoons or spell slots because of everything that they're dealing with to start out with. And it's a really great way to be an ally by helping to make sure that they are protected and taken care of for those of us who maybe have more spell slots available.
Yeah, for sure. That is an important thing to keep in mind, especially when you're doing community outreach or helping or advocacy or whatever the case may be. The more stressors in a person's life, the fewer spell points or spoons or whatever they have available. Like many of us in the gender and sexual minorities communities, we're getting really anxious about what's going to happen after next week. And it's depleting our ability to do things. It's not good. And that's a thing to keep in mind just for general compassion or to help someone. Like if you've got a person, whatever their situation, but their family is unaccepting or aggressive or threatening to kick them out or whatever the case may be, that's going to stress them a lot, and it's going to greatly decrease their ability to do stuff. But if you can help in any way, maybe offer them a couch to crash on, you can help relieve a considerable amount of that stress, because now they have an option, they have a safety net. And so even if the worst happens, they're not going to be homeless. And
Mhm.
I'm sure everybody here knows people in the GSM community are extremely vulnerable to homelessness. I myself was homeless for 8 years. It's it really depletes your spoons.
Wow, yes. Thank you for sharing that example. And absolutely right. So I think the takeaway here is use your spell slots for good and use them
Or
wisely.
or if you get an opportunity to take down the patriarchy, go for it.
Yes. We can do this together with our large party.
Yes.
Yes, I
Elon
love
Musk
that.
is the final boss.
Amazing. I feel like in the hangout we need to like work out the particulars of which spells are most effective. This I'm having a lot of fun going off in my head on a tangent with this. This is great. Okay, back on track. Um, let's see. Before we do go to the poll results and then the Q&A, Glenda, did you have any other topics you want to hit on before we do those other things?
No, not really, other than this was a fabulous discussion. And again, Ember, I loved the resources that you spoke about and shared. And I can't emphasize enough. I say this every time I have the opportunity. Street epistemology is your friend, and learning how to discuss with people, it helps you protect your spoons. Like, if you think, I can't talk to people about these topics, it's so draining because I just end up debating and getting so upset and it's enraging. I have learned over time that street epistemology definitely shifts that emotional stress because you are not debating someone, you were getting them to reflect on their own thinking, and it just shifts your mindset of being able to discuss topics. So I'm not saying when you're talking about to someone or discussing with somebody who doesn't believe in basic human rights that you aren't screaming inside or that it's very frustrating. However, I find that your patience can go a lot longer if you learn the Socratic debate method of street epistemology. Anthony Magnabosco talks about it a lot, and on the other atheist channels, they go into that, and that's a really great it's a great resource. And yes, like plugging the line, the Transatlantic Call-in show is really good. If you don't feel like you've got the skill set to be able to discuss these issues with people because you just don't know how to say or get into these topics, I highly recommend just checking out those videos. Dr. Ben, Arden Hart, these are great trans content creators to follow to really be able to just refresh your knowledge on how to get better about this topic, on how to like learn how to discuss this topic.
Yeah, for sure. In addition, they're of course great on both trans topics and epistemology generally. Ben, because he is a doctor and so deals with nonsense on the medical front from people. He's got multiple perspectives there. And Arden, because she's active as a counter-apologist as well. She drops in on some of the other shows on the line from time to time, like the Hang Up with Matt or Skep Talk, or I know she's been on Chewed Gum a few times, which is the women-led show on the line, which is also nice to see. And a bunch of different things. But of particular note is Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels, whom you can often catch on the line, also his own channel. He's been making a study of street epistemology for the past year or so, and he's gotten pretty good at it.
Oh, excellent. Great to have another reference as well. We are full of resources and references tonight. I am loving it. Thank you for sharing those, Ember. Um, is there anything else, Ember, that you want to talk about or mention before we kind of move on to the poll results and the Q&A portion here?
Oh goodness, I could talk about so many things, but I'll pass for the moment because I'm also very low on spoons myself.
Fair enough. Well, we appreciate you using one here this evening, or however many it took. It is definitely a great benefit to all of us. So thank you for choosing to spend it here.
It's
And
hard to say no to Helen.
that's true. That's very true. Well, I'm glad she voluntold you and twisted your arm into joining us. Okay, well, let's take a look then at our poll results and see what our thoughts are on those. So, at the beginning of the program, for anybody that wasn't here, we did have an anonymous poll that we launched, and we'll look and see how people answered that. So the first question that we asked was, do you subscribe to any conspiracy theories? And 51% of people said absolutely not. But 32% said yes, maybe one or two, but I don't think they should really count as conspiracy theories. 10% of people said that they do subscribe to more than two. And 7% of people think we're all lizard people. So
Valid.
yeah, jury's still out on that one.
I mean, what is it? The law of monophily? We technically are lizard people, yes.
I love it. I love it. We've got our lizard brains, metaphorically speaking. That's great. How do these results line up with y'all's expectations, Ember or Glenda? Was this what y'all expected?
Well, I didn't really have an expectation, but I mean, it's nice to see that there's a definite majority who aren't conspiracists, and I suspect a fair chunk of the rest were either dealing with like some of the really, really low grade stuff, like birds aren't real, or we're just messing around. I don't
Yeah.
imagine anybody who, was like a serious QAnoner would even be in this room.
That would be surprising to me as well. Yeah, we do kind of self-select into this program, so these polls are probably not great indicators of the opinions of the general population. It's just whoever's here tonight, and they knew what we were going to be talking about. So, great point. Okay, I'm interested in question number two. We asked, have you been personally impacted by the beliefs of a conspiracy theory? And 45% of people said yes, they have. And I would love to know if anybody feels like writing in the chat which conspiracy theory it was, or if they want to share a little bit more about that. It's also something we can talk about in the Hangout. 33% of people said only insofar as I'm annoyed by the people promoting them. And 8% of people said no, and 15% are not sure or not applicable. So, wow, that was actually a large number of people that selected yes on that.
Well, it makes sense in that as annoying and silly as some of them are, like moon landing denial or whatnot, but like the 9/11 truthers, for example, almost everybody has some red hat uncle who insists on that. And often that drives people into other crazier conspiracies like QAnon, for example, which I mean, honestly, I don't think there's anybody in the United States who can legitimately say they were not affected by QAnon just because of January 6th.
I think that that's a really important point to make, that anyone who doesn't, if you're an American, not even if you're an American, pretty much everybody on the planet has been affected by a conspiracy theory, because global politics affect the rest of the world. American politics have been absolutely affected by conspiracy theories, and these ideas that have no basis in reality, like, are now there. Yes, climate change denial, like, this is, and it's affecting our lives and will continue to affect our lives. You are affected by conspiratorial beliefs of others, regardless of whether you've heard of it, believe in it, or put any stock in it at all. You are personally affected by it, which is why it's important to stay informed.
Oh, yes. I mean, we've been talking for a little while now about the fact that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, third in line for the US presidency, is a young Earth creationist. He used to work with Ken Ham, the guy who has the giant fake ark in Kentucky. It's it's pretty dangerous. And now the head dude in charge of the military as of next week is a Christian nationalist, even though he's not really a Christian. You could argue that none of them are, because they're certainly not doing anything remotely resembling what Jesus said to do.
Yep. Absolutely. And as we're discussing this, I'm noticing several people are changing their answer here to yes, I have been affected by this. So good discussion. And let's go to our last question here. We asked, which of these conspiracy theories do you think is most likely to be true? And we listed several pretty silly ones. By far the most popular one on our list, though, was that hot dogs and buns are intentionally sold in unequal amounts, so you have to buy more. And it has been pointed out very sagely in the chat that I wrote uneven amounts, but it should have said unequal amounts, because they are actually both sold in even numbers. It's just not the same even number in each package.
Details.
Details are important. We like to be correct here. We also like to find out if we're incorrect, so that means we learn something new.
It's true. That's a huge difference between critical thinkers and conspiracy theorists. And I'm glad you mentioned it because, oh my goodness, I get so excited over this one. People who are science minded, who are conspiracy minded, we like to be wrong because then we get to learn more. That's the actual point. Whereas a conspiracy minded person or a religious minded person, their brain is a brick wall. They're right. I mean, I often say when you pretend to have all the answers, you stop looking for the real answers.
Yes. Was that an actual Bible that you just held up?
It is. I keep one under my desk. This was sent to me by a great friend of the community, Robin Webster, who lives in the Tennessee area, actually. I believe she's taking a job in Murfreesboro soon.
Oh, wow. She can attend the support group if interested.
Quite possibly.
Amazing. I love that you have books at the ready to make a point with.
It comes up a lot. I mean, somebody will throw a Bible verse at me and I'll just pull out the book. I'll be like, let's look it up right now.
Yes, we can test this claim.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great fun. Thank you so much for sharing all of these insights and resources with us. I'll drop some of those in the chat here in just a minute. But let's go on to Q&A. What do you say?
Hell yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. Let's see what questions we have. And we'll get to as many as we can. I know we have a lot of questions. We can't always get through all of them, but please feel free to stick around for the hangout if we don't get to yours, and we can still continue to have the conversation around it. So let's see here. Where should we go? So we have one person who's asking, and this may be more of a question for some of the RFR folks who are online here. But Ember, please feel free to chime in here too if you have ideas. Someone's asking, where can we find secular religious trauma therapy support groups? And, you know, we do offer peer support groups, which we spoke about earlier in the program. I am going to drop the link for where you can find those. Those are all facilitated by trained volunteers. And we have some of those that take place online and in person every week. When we were joking earlier about people being in Murfreesboro, that is one of the locations where we have an in-person support group. And I'm going to drop the link where you can find those. But I wonder if this person may have been asking about support groups that are maybe hosted by a licensed therapist or something like that. And I can do a little bit of digging and check. In the meantime, I will also drop a link here to seculartherapy.org, which is where you can get connected with a licensed mental health care provider. So that is another avenue to get in touch with a provider who may be able to point you in the right direction. And if anybody else has ideas for that, other RFR folks or others, please let us know. But that would be where I would recommend getting started, and that's a great question. So thanks for asking about that. Okay, let's see. Glenda, would you like to ask a question?
Yes. So another question was they wanted to know, was America one of the first official countries with official documents stating that it is a secular nation? Quotations, because we know not theory versus what's on paper versus what's actually practiced.
Yeah. It's possible. That's a little outside my wheelhouse. I may have glanced at the information at some point in the past, but it did not my area.
Totally okay. In addition to getting excited about being wrong, we also support on this channel saying, I don't know.
That's
Totally.
another important difference between communities, you know, with the excusagists, because they claim to have all knowledge. They can't ever say I don't know. They just make shit up, but they'll never say I don't know.
Exactly right. Okay, so let's go on to another one. We have one here that is asking, how do you handle atheists who were raised religious and who believe in these conspiracy theories. For example, this person says, my brothers turn off when I point out the Christian nationalist roots of their transphobic talking points because they believe themselves to be too smart to fall for religion anymore. So how do you deal with that?
It varies a lot from person to person. A big part of the issue is stated right in the question. They think they're too smart. And that's the tricky bit, is the only defense we have against that sort of thing worming its way into our brain and making us into another RFK Jr. is knowing we're all vulnerable. In fact, the smarter we are, the more vulnerable we become, because we are more convinced of our own ability to tell fact from fiction with no critical oversight. The only defense is to know that you're vulnerable and to constantly reevaluate your own ideas, compare notes, check against the science. In the case of transphobic relatives, maybe approaching it as the connection to Christian nationalism might not be the route that works. Maybe say, well, if maybe you're not being taken in by the religion, but you are being taken in by bad pseudoscience nonsense. Look at the actual science, the stuff put out by the American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, the American Endocrine Society. There's like literally every single legitimate medical body on earth has valid information about trans people, and all of it makes the transphobic stuff, it clearly shows it's nonsense. Like, as recently happened with Jerry Coyne. First of all, he's a biologist. He's not an endocrinologist. He's not a psychologist. He has nothing to say on this matter. But in his case, there, what was the thing? I lost track of the thing. Stephen Novella.
Yes.
Future guest here on RFRx.
Yes, that's right.
He, before Jerry Coyne even wrote his nonsense, Stephen had already written a counter to it, because Jerry's been peddling this bullshit everywhere that'll have him for years now. And Stephen's got a great article out on his own website. When I did the news report on the Jerry Coyne situation, I included a quote from Stephen's article. So like that's another scientist, Joan Roughgarden, evolutionary biologist, who's been finding evidence of transness in a bunch of different species all over the world. Robert Sapolsky has also been finding cool stuff in neurology. There's like every single science independently debunks the transphobes. It's exactly like the young earthers. Every discipline totally debunks their nonsense. Geology, biology, evolution, all of it shows that young earth cannot have happened. The same thing with transphobia. Every single science that has anything to say on the matter shows that the transphobes are completely full of it.
Ramen. Yes. This is not a brand new thing. This is well-known information that is well documented, well evidenced, well sourced. It is easy to find credible scholarly information on all of this. This is just, it's simply not the case that this is made up. Oh, no one knew about trans people until 10 years ago. That is absolutely absurdly false.
Yeah, I find that kind of thing hilarious. Where did I put? Aha. Here's a book called The Hidden Case of Ewan Forbes. Ewan was a trans man in the middle of the 20th century who, because he was a trans man, there was some inheritance nonsense involved. A cousin thought that he should inherit the family fortune, but because Ewan was now a man, then he kind of cut in line for inheritance. There was a whole thing. This was the middle of the last century. And this only happened as it did because the psychologists and the sexologists decided to insert themselves into the trans sphere Prior to that, there's legal records going back another 50 years of trans people just being trans and everything is fine. There's a story, the Daily Mail in the UK, one of the more transphobic papers today, but in the early 1900s, they ran a story about a pair of sisters who disappeared for a couple of years and came back as brothers. And they just reported it as, hey, this was a remarkable thing, but they're men now, so they get to vote. Get used to it. You know, it just, trans people have just been here and just accepted until the assholes like John Money decided to put themselves into it and say, oh, it must be a mental illness. And we've spent the last 70 years proving that nope, maybe not. Maybe you should have a reason for your hypothesis before you start fucking up people's lives. I don't know.
Also,
Yeah,
I'm really glad you brought that up because now my expertise as an amateur, and this is my expertise is that I did get an art degree. I got my BFA in painting and drawing, and so I didn't officially minor in art history, but I essentially minored in art history. And studying art history, during World War II, we burned a massive amount of artwork from queer and women painters and artists and anything that was not considered part of like Hitler's vision for, you know, the white supremacist vision that he had. It was known as degenerate art. We actually had one of the most, to this day, it's one of the most viewed exhibits ever, was he built a museum, put artwork in there as this is an example of degenerate art made by degenerate freaks. And then afterwards, all that work was burned, as well as all that artwork that we have lost over time, which is, I mean, again, it's an entirely, watch Monuments Men. They like talk about the work that was burned. It's a great film. We also burned a massive amount of, I say we, the Nazis burned a massive amount of literature and historical record from queer and trans people that was going back centuries. So there is a lot about history and lives that we have lost, but it was taken from us intentionally. So there are records. We just lost a massive amount during the Nazi white supremacist movement. So I just want to let everyone know that that is a thing.
Oh, for
yes.
sure. And that's not even, I mean, that's another thing that comes up is a lot of people will say, okay, so trans people go back to the Hirschfeld clinic. Fine, but no further. But then we have records of people transitioning before then. And they go, oh, okay, well, it must be when synthetic hormones became commercially available in the 1920s. Well, no, because before they were commercially available, people did it in other ways. There's other resources. There's certain kinds of mushrooms. There's a whole thing with pregnant mares. There are folk ways to get your hands on hormones, and people did, and people used them because trans people have always been around. For instance, here is a statue from the freaking ancient Greeks of a trans person carved in marble. We're as old as it, we're older than history because history is definitionally when we started writing stuff down, writing history, pre-writing, prehistory. There were trans people already when humans figured out writing. The oldest piece of writing we have with an author's name attached, 5,000 years ago, talks about the trans priestesses of Inanna in Mesopotamia. We are older than history and we have historical proof. It's wild that people are like, oh, it's a new thing. What do you mean? We're older than Christianity. We're older than freaking Judaism. What are you talking about?
The new thing is politicizing it and making it the top issue that we want to yell at people about and take away people's rights for. It's certainly not new uh, in terms of people existing. And oh, someone was asking Ember, what was the name of that book that you held out that was the one where they had the legal dispute about the inheritance?
Oh yeah. This is good stuff right here. This is The Hidden Case of Ewan Forbes by Zoe Playden. And it's fascinating because after the case was this screwed up the second half of the 20th century in the UK because when they settled this case, they were worried about the case because of primogeniture. It was entirely because of the freaking royalty. Because if there were a prince or princess who transitioned and then either added themselves to or removed themselves from the line of royal succession, it could cause a civil war. So, because of this case, they made a secret law that has been sealed for decades that invalidated trans people. And it affected just a couple of years later the famous case Corbett v. Corbett, which continued to affect things up until what was it, the Beckett case? I may be misremembering the name precisely, but it was in the early 2000s. They're about to make a new movie about it. Yeah, it just, that's why this dude's inheritance, primogeniture, and that's the only reason trans people are invalid. I mean, hell, in the Corbett case, the judge ruled that Parliament hadn't defined what sex meant when they said sex was between a man and a woman. That was why the judge had the case. He actually ruled against Miss Ashley, I believe her name was, because of that law. But he couldn't disclose it was because of that law because it was sealed. So he had to make up a bullshit excuse. And that's why the case was such a mess. So it had a huge impact on history. And of course, you know, what was happening in the UK influences the rest of the English speaking world, which in turn got some of the wheels turning that we're still seeing rolling today in both the UK and the US as transphobic movements.
Wow, that's really interesting. I did not know about that book, and I'm definitely adding that to my book list that I inevitably add to every Monday night faster than I can read from it. But
See, if you
that
watch the
one sounds good.
Transpositions Weekly on YouTube, you would have known about that a year ago because
You're
I
right.
reported on that story.
And I do watch that, and I didn't see that episode.
Aha.
I'm realizing that I need to catch up on a bunch of episodes too.
Absolutely. You know, that is a good way that you can help not just the community in general, but
Hmm.
our effort personally, because it's our channel, we hit the 500 subscriber mark, but you also need 3,000 hours of watch time before YouTube will let you turn on all the tools. And we need those tools to do our jobs better. And it's an important job. We are the only weekly trans news show that I know of, period. And as we're moving into a second Trump administration, it is really important that trans people have a source for news, or other people, allies, to have news about the trans community. And there's no one, I mean, there's queer news tonight, but they're not trans focused. There's TACS, but they're not news focused, you know?
Yes, that's a great point, and we're getting people asking in the chat for the link to where they can go and watch. If you want, I can drop that in there. Is it any particular playlist that you're wanting people to prioritize?
Oh, there's a few different playlists. If you want to hear more from me specifically, I do the good news segment, and that's got its own playlist. If you're into sports, Carly Chardonnay Webb has her sports playlist. There's also a playlist of the overall shows. We do like 2+ hour general broadcasts with segments from all of the hosts on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. I should specify Eastern because you know internet. But there's a playlist of those as well, and a bunch of other stuff. We even have a few shorts here and there, trans people in history, that I do when I have time.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. We want to help you out there and show people another resource. Let me drop the link to that in the chat. So that's the Transpositions on YouTube. So give them some viewing hours, and let's learn new things together.
Yeah, and hopefully you enjoy too. I mean, that's why I do good news, because we really need more good news in the world.
That is the truth. So, and I appreciate you bringing good news into our lives. Okay, let's see. Glenda, do you want to ask one more question before we wrap up?
Yes, let's see. I think we can ask one more question. Oh, now I feel pressure. Which one do I choose?
Hurry, hurry.
Put a clock on it.
Here's a good one. We've sort of touched on it, but I would let this is a great wrap-up question for the general discussion. to what extent should you engage with, it says in conspiracy theories, I also think it probably means with conspiracy theorists. To what extent should you engage in conspiracy theories? Should you read up on them? Should you discuss them, etc.?
It never hurts to learn things. You can find out a tremendous amount of interesting stuff if you're into history, for example. Learning about where the transphobe movement came from and what motivates it behind the scenes and all of that stuff, it can be very useful, but it's also kind of a niche interest. You don't actually need that. You don't need any background information to refute a conspiracy theorist. You just need good epistemology. You just have to have the same thing you use against religion. How do you know that? Why do you think so? Is that a good reason? Just basic critical thinking. But as far as engaging with them, that's more of a there's the temptation to be like Matt Dillahunty and want to swat down every single nonsense thing that crosses your path. But you have to watch out for your own mental health. It's so easy to just burn out all your spell slots and not even realize you've done it.
That's for sure. And now we know we need to be careful about conserving our spell slots and using them wisely. I love it. Okay, well, I think that is a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Ember, for sharing all of that. That was incredible. You shared a lot of information with us in a very short period of time and so many resources for us to follow up on. So thank you for that. And thank you, Glenda, for co-hosting most excellently.
Thank you very
Loved
much.
it.
I was honored and nervous, but thank you for putting your trust and faith in me. I hope I did okay.
Oh, I knew you would do better than okay. And you did.
Huzzah.
And huzzah! Yes, and thank you to everyone else who makes the show happen every week. David in the background, helping us stomp trolls. Nikki streaming on to the ACD. We have Gail and Daryl back here supporting us and making this organization run, and all of our other co-hosts and hangout hosts and chat moderators and our social media team and the post-production team and everybody in the whole organization, and all of you for attending. Thanks for being here and helping us make Monday night the best night of the week. And don't forget to join us next week, same time, same place. We're going to have Chris Shelton, another returning guest, a former Scientologist who has a lot of expertise in cults or anti-cult expertise, I guess we should say. Can't wait to hear from him again. And also upcoming, we have Forrest Falkai, Secular Rarity, Stephen Novella, as Ember mentioned, and Erica Matthews. So stay tuned for all of those. And don't forget to follow us on social media if you are able to do so without outing yourself or anything like that. It does help people find us and find our resources. We have a link tree that I dropped at the very top there that has our links listed out. And you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and of course, you can find previous RFRx recordings on our YouTube channel. So check us out in all of those places and click all the buttons so other people can find us. And Glenda, what else can people do to get involved?
Well, you can join the coolest nonprofit group under on the flat earth, under the what is it, static position sun? I don't know how flat earthers
In
believe
the
the sun.
snow globe.
In the snow globe, the coolest volunteer group in the snow globe. So if we have learned that healing can also come from helping others, and RFR volunteers, we find purpose and meaning by volunteering our time to help others. I have loved my time as a volunteer. I have met genuinely the most incredible, wonderful, spectacular human beings ever in my life by being a volunteer. So you too can join the Cool Kid Club. Please go to our website at recoveringfromreligion.org and check out the volunteer link. We have a very, very, very broad spectrum of needs. As you heard Kara, as they listed all the different things that we do and thanking all the different people, these are needs that human hands fill. So we're looking for IT, tech support, helpline agents. We're always looking for new volunteers. So please consider checking out our volunteer thing to apply. And there's no, you don't, I promise you do not have to take, it's not like taking on a full-time job, just a few hours a month is, if that's all you can volunteer, we would very much appreciate that. And it's wonderful. So if you go to recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer, you can join the inner cult circle of the cool volunteer squad.
Ooh,
We may
excellent
or may
show.
not, you may or may not like one of us. One of
One
us.
of
When we
us.
get there.
Yes. I'm for it. Please join us. And also, if you want a much condensed summary of the services that we offer, if you know someone who might benefit from learning about that, we also have this video called RFR, What We Do, on our YouTube channel that's about 3 minutes long that explains all of those services that we told you about at the beginning of the program. So feel free to share that widely as well. And with that, let me hand it over to Dr. Ray to wrap us up here for the evening.
Thanks, Kara. Amber, thank you so much. This was better than I expected by a long shot. You covered, like Kara said, a huge amount in a very short period of time. A couple of things I wanted to throw out here is I loved what you said about people, protect the people first. And at the organization that I belong to, Oasis, you may know about Oasis. I don't know. Are you familiar with Oasis, Ember?
I haven't heard of that one yet. No.
Okay, well, it's like Sunday Assembly, only it's different. Anyway, we have a saying that people are more important than beliefs. And it really captures what I think you were trying to say is what puzzles me is I don't care what your crazy beliefs are. The fundamental issue is protect the human being at the center of that, rather than letting the beliefs govern how you treat people. Treat people right first. It's hard because that's not the way religion works. But anyway, that's what you were saying, and I really like that. People are more important than beliefs. And so if you just keep that in mind, even if you totally disagree with somebody on something, keep in mind they're still a human being and keep that forefront. And that might help them change their mind, just treating them. And then talking about, well, how does that affect the trans person that you're complaining about or whatever? I don't know. I'm not trying to teach something. I'm just giving an idea there. Also, there's a religious trauma support groups. They're few and far between, but there are some. I know Janice Selby. I put it in the chat. She runs one, and now they're a therapist and they do charge for the service, but it is specifically focused on religious trauma. And then Dr. Marlene Winnell does a retreat and an online group. Again, both are something they charge for. There are a number of other organizations out there doing religious trauma support groups or therapy groups, but let me just caution you: a lot of them are run by religious therapists, so they're not secular. So be very careful about who you chose. You might end up going to 3 sessions and find out they all want to read the Bible to get over their religious trauma or some bullshit like that. Another thing I didn't know if you knew about, Ember, is Dr. Veronica Drans. Are you familiar with her?
That
Maybe
doesn't
not.
ring a bell. I'm bad with names sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I've just put it in the thing. She gave a talk in Madison, Wisconsin at a conference I attended. I was speaking there, and she was the speaker just before me. She got a speech that just blow my mind is an understatement. It was an amazingly good speech. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of John Money. And she explained how how horrible John Money was to everything. He's just a horrible person in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned John Money. I thought, well, the people watching here tonight, and you might want to connect with her. I found her to be incredibly knowledgeable. She's a PhD nurse. She's in the medical field, but her specialty is LGBTQ kinds of things. And so anyway, just an idea. And last in my little list I got from listening to you is Nathan Lentz, and I think we're gonna have Nathan Lentz on soon. Has a brand new book out called Sexual Evolution. I read the manuscript, the pre-release copy of it a couple weeks ago, and I just wrote my endorsement blurb for his book. It's you can get it on or look it up on YouTube. I think it comes out in a couple of weeks. But sexual evolution, the underlying piece of it is how important sexual diversity is in nature. It's just such an interesting book. He really goes through human evolution and human sexuality and everything we would imagine there, but he also looks at all the other animals, going clear back to the original sexual creatures that may have just been, single cell organisms or something like that.
Mhm.
So it's I think you'll want to look at that book, Ember, when it comes out.
Yeah, it sounds
Anyway,
really interesting.
it is. I found it to be. I couldn't put it down once I started reading it. And he's a evolutionary biologist, so evidently smarter than Richard Dawkins, I guess. But
It's,
no, won't say anymore.
it's a completely different field, but there is a certain science to particular kinds of aging. Not everyone ages the same, as I'm sure everyone here knows, but there's certain groups of people with a propensity towards calcification of the pineal gland, which in turn makes it very difficult to form new memories. Like, the memory science gets really weird as well, because there's different kinds of memories. There's personal memories, there's interactions with your families, there's where did I put my car keys, what did I have for breakfast, and then there's like academic memories, like facts, textbook knowledge that gets stored in a different part of the brain. And as certain glands start to calcify, forming those memories gets harder and harder for some people who age down certain pathways. And that's one of the reasons that there's the tropes about older people not being able to learn how to work new technology, because you can show them, but they can't form the textbook kind of memories as easily. The same sort of thing can happen even to evolutionary biologists. Not to excuse Dawkins, because he is being an aggressive asshole about it, but it's not impossible that he simply is an old dog who can't learn new tricks.
I have no idea. I've met him on a number of occasions. I actually had the opportunity to spend almost a whole afternoon with Dawkins about 10 years ago, one-on-one. So I got to get a good sample of who he was. That was 10 years ago. I don't know. I just wish he would stop being stupid.
A few
Anyway.
people have proposed to me that it's just a grift because he's sensing that he's fading into obscurity in his old age. The newer generations of atheist activists, they don't know him. They haven't read his book. They haven't seen him on stage, and they don't care. So he's looking for anything to maintain relevance. I can't rule it out.
I have no clue if it is or not, but well, anyway, that's my 2 cents. If you've enjoyed this tonight, all those of you who are watching or listening now, I hope you'll consider becoming a donor. We appreciate our monthly donors because it helps us budget for a full year. And just go online and hit the donate button. Any amount, $4 a month, $10 a month, $1,000 a month. We'll take whatever you want to give. Because we don't have members, we don't charge dues, we don't charge anything for the client. All of our services are free. So we only offer our services through the volunteer work and for the donations that you give to us. And with that, back to you.